Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to another episode of Building Accurate Habitats in Jurassic World Evolution 2. In this special episode, I will be talking about the giant clawed Therizinosaurus, the largest representative of a unique theropod group called Maniraptors. The unusual arms and body anatomy extrapolated from relatives of Therizinosaurus have been cited as an example of convergent evolution with calocatharines and other primarily herbivorous mammals. An adult Therizinosaurus is thought to have weighed about 6 tons. That's as heavy as a large Tyrannosaurus rex. While it did not live at the same time as T-Rex, Therizinosaurus did share its environment with Tarbosaurus, a close relative of Tyrannosaurus rex that's been dubbed the T-Rex of Asia due to how similar these two species are. Most herbivores during this period could not fend themselves off against such deadly predators. The Therizinosaurus proved to be an exception. With its large size and giant claws, the Therizinosaurus would have been capable of defending itself against even the hungriest Tarbosaurus, making the Tarbosaurus think twice before adding the Therizinosaurus to its dinner menu. This episode will feature a complete species profile about the scythe lizard, and then attempt at recreating its original environment in an enclosure. So let's jump right in and start getting to know Therizinosaurus and why its features were so unique that it had to be featured in the epic conclusion of the Jurassic Park franchise. For those who like to skip ahead, I added some timestamps for you to click. For everyone else, let's begin. Therizinosaurus comes from a genus of very large Therizinosaurids that lived in Asia during the late Cretaceous period in what is known as a Nemegt Formation around 75 to 70 million years ago. Though the body remains of Therizinosaurus are relatively incomplete, inferences can still be made about its physical characteristics based on more complete and related Therizinosaurids. The discovery of more similar dinosaurs toward the end of the 20th century allowed for those gaps to be filled in, with modern reconstructions of Therizinosaurids being considered more accurate. Like other members of its family, Therizinosaurus had a proportionally small skull bearing a horny beak atop its long neck, bipedal gaits, a large belly for foliage processing, and sparse feathering. Other traits that were likely present in Therizinosaurus included a heavily air-filled vertebral column and a robustly built pelvis. This colossal Therizinosaurus could grow up to 30 to 33 feet long, 13 to 15 feet tall, and weigh up to 6 tons, making it a formidable dinosaur. Furthermore, this strange-looking dinosaur had white hips and its forelimbs were particularly robust and had 3 fingers that bore ungulls, which unlike other relatives were very stiffened, elongated, and only had significant curvatures at the tip. Ultimately, these hand claws are what ultimately give Therizinosaurus the nickname of scythe lizard. So the generic name of Therizinosaurus is derived from the Greek word therizo, meaning scythe reaper cut, and saurus meaning lizard, with the specific name Caloniformis taken from the Greek word chelone meaning turtle, and formis as the Latin word for shape, since the remains were thought to belong to a turtle-like reptile, but more on that later. In Therizinosaurus, these claws reached up to 1 meter long, and their purpose has 3 main theories. Their first is for display, with the larger claws being indicative of reproductive maturity. The second theory, which leads on from the first, is for interspecies combat between 2 males, in a similar manner that ceratopsian dinosaurs are thought to have used their horns in dominance combat. This could also mean Therizinosaurus using its claws against predatory dinosaurs in self-defense. The third theory is that the claws were aids in reaching up into the tree canopy to pull down choice pieces of vegetation, in the same way that a modern-day sloth will also use its long claws to reach its food. Therizinosaurus was already a very tall animal, and with the addition of these claws, it likely had reduced competition over the foliage in its habitat. Studies on Therizinosaurus relatives also show that it likely had very weak jaw, and probably would have fed by also sitting down and using its long arms and claws to pull vast amounts of vegetation into its mouth. To feed and support such a large frame, Therizinosaurus had hind limbs that ended in 4 functionally weight-bearing toes, differing from other theropod groups in which the first toe was reduced to a dew claw, hence it had a 4-toe condition. This large frame also makes the Therizinosaurus the largest known Maniraptoran, along with the similar-looking Deinonychus. Members of this group are thought to be descended from carnivorous ancestors, but the exact diet of Therizinosaurus is still not absolutely certain because the skull is unknown. Without this, it is impossible to look at the dentition and bite characteristics that are required to learn about an animal's diet. Another important distinction about this dinosaur is that it is usually depicted with feathers as seen here, but it must be said that there is no direct evidence to support the existence of feathers on Therizinosaurus. Evidence for feather mainly comes from the remains of Bapiosaurus, but at little over 2 meters in length, it is one of the smallest members of the group. In contrast, Therizinosaurus is one of the largest, and creatures of this size usually have very little if any form of insulation on the grounds of gigantothermy. As I said earlier, during the early phases of its discovery, Therizinosaurus was assumed to be a species of an aquatic turtle, but after several examinations and revisions, it was given the description of a gigantic carnosaur measuring 55 feet in length. Only after the discovery of related species like Northornicus, the debate over their appearance finally ended. In the year 1948, the USSR Academy of Sciences organized a series of paleontological expeditions in endemic formation of the Gobi Desert in southwestern Mongolia with the goal of discovering new fossil findings. These expeditions unearthed numerous dinosaurs and turtle fossils remains, but the most notable discovery were 3 partial claw bones of considerable size. In 1954, these partial claw bones were described by the Russian paleontologist Evgeny Malib, who used them to scientifically name a new genus and type species, Therizinosaurus caleniformis, becoming the holotype specimen. During and after its original description, Therizinosaurus had rather complex relationships due to the lack of complete specimen and relatives at the time. For example, Malib thought that the fossils belonged to a large turtle-like reptile that relied on its giant claws to harvest seaweed. A couple years later, in 1968, the upper portion of a Therizinosaurus claw was found in the Altan Ul locality in Mongolia, providing more clues about this mysterious dinosaur. In 1970, the Russian paleontologist Anatoly K. Rodonvensky was one of the first authors to suggest that Therizinosaurus was a theropod and not a turtle. He made comparisons between Chelantesaurus and the holotype claws of Therizinosaurus to propose that the appendages actually came from a Carnosaurian dinosaur, thereby interpreting Therizinosaurus as a theropod. That same year, after re-examining the claws, Anatoly suggested a possible further function. Maybe Therizinosaurus claws made it specialize in opening termite mounds, the same way sloth bears do today. These theropod affinities were also followed by the Polish paleontologist Hauska Smolska and co-author Eva Ranovics in 1970 during their naming and description of Linoceros, another large theropod from the endemic formation that was also initially known from partial arms. Similar to Rodonvensky, they suggested that the claws were more likely to belong to a Carnosaurian theropod rather than a large marine turtle. Then 2 years later, in 1972, the lower portion of a fragmental Therizinosaurus claw was discovered at the upper white beds of the Herman Sab locality in Mongolia. The year 1973 became a very important year for Therizinosaurus because during that year one of the more complete and larger specimens was collected from the Herman Sab locality. The fossil remains consisted of both left and right arms, some ribs, and various metacarpal and carpal bones. Also, during that same year, another specimen was discovered by the joint Soviet-Mongolian paleontological expedition at the same locality. Unlike the previous findings, the specimen was composed of the femur, tibia, and other leg and foot bones that had never been discovered before. All of these specimens were first described and referred to as Therizinosaurus by the Mongolian paleontologist Rinchen Barspol in 1976. His new findings mentioned that the unusual claws of Therizinosaurus may have been employed to impale or dig up loose terrain. However, he did mention that the claws may not have been as strong as previously thought. The newer remains would also be studied and described by Mongolian paleontologist Altanjiro Prol in 1982, who also happened to be one of the first paleontologists who regarded Therizinosaurus as a theropod rather than as a turtle. Nevertheless, after years of taxonomic debate, Therizinosaurus is now placed in one of the major dinosaur clades, Theropoda, specifically as Maniraptorans. Things settled down until 1993 when paleontologists Dale L. Russell and Donald E. Russell analyzed Therizinosaurus and Calicotherium and noted the similarities in their body shape, stance, hind limbs, and strong arms, even though they form parts of different groups. They considered these adaptations to represent an example of convergent evolution, a condition where organisms evolve similar traits without necessarily being related. Moreover, their body shape is somewhat exhibited by modern-day gorillas. Because these animals with this type of body plan are known to represent herbivores, the author suggested this lifestyle for Therizinosaurus. Russell reconstructed the feeding behavior for Therizinosaurus as being able to sit while consuming foliage from large shrubs and trees. The plant material would have been harvested with its hands, and this action was likely favored by its elongated neck, which likely prevented the use of large amounts of force and effort. As its arms were long enough to touch the ground during certain stances, they could have helped the dinosaur to rise from a prone position, and as mentioned earlier, when browsing in a standing stance, Therizinosaurus may have been able to reach even higher vegetation supported by its sturdy and robust feet. 2 years later, in 1995, paleontologist Lev A. Nesev suggested that the claws were used for interspecies fighting and defense against predators, which had been proposed before. Only this time, Nesev argued that juveniles could have possibly used their claws for climbing trees in a similar way to the modern-day sloths or Hoatzin-chicks. Much more recently, in 2014, Dr. Stefan Lautenschlager tested the function of various Therizinosaurus hand claws through digital simulations. These claws underwent 3 different scenarios, which included scratch and digging, hook and pulling, and piercing, all with about 90 pounds of force behind it. These results showed that the claws had the highest stress in the scratch and digging scenario, but less stress on the hook and pull scenario, leaving the piercing scenario as causing the least stress on the claws. Today, scientists agree that Therizinosaurus was not carnivorous, but instead herbivorous based on the studies of its close relatives like Erlikosaurus, Sagnosaurus, Nothronicus, and Velcarius. Dr. Lautenschlager noted that the claws of Therizinosaurus and its relatives were not functional for scratching and digging, and thus it was more likely that Therizinosaurus made use of its hands in a hook and pull fashion to pull or grasp vegetation within reach, similar to the current anteater or extinct ground sloths. Lautenschlager could not confirm that the hand claws could have been used for defense, intraspecific competition, stabilization by grasping tree trunks during high browsing, sexual dimorphism, or gripping mates during mating given the lack of more specimens. He clarified that there is no evidence that the long claws of Therizinosaurus would have ever been used in active defense or attack. However, it is possible that these appendages could have had some role when facing a threat, such as intimidation, and it had to look intimidating as it shared its environment with Tarbosaurus, one of the largest carnivorous theropods that some paleontologists have nicknamed it the Tyrannosaurus rex of Asia. Now, let's talk about the environment that Therizinosaurus lived in to give us a better idea of how to replicate its natural habitat. As mentioned earlier, the remains of Therizinosaurus have been found in a well-known Nemec formation in Mongolia. Although this formation has never been dated radiometrically because of this continuity of exposures and absence of datable volcanic rock facies, the vertebrate fossil assemblage suggests that the late Cretaceous period possibly between 75 and 70 million years ago. It lived in the same area as the notorious Velociraptor, but around 5 million years later. By then, a wetter climate had replaced the deserts in which the Velociraptors lived, so the environment that Therizinosaurus inhabited was determined by the sediment found across the formation, the isotopic signature preserved on teeth enamel of herbivorous dinosaurs, and the remains of petrified wood. These remains consisted of large winding and braided rivers with extensive coniferous woodlands composed of large enclosed canopy-like forests of Araucaria, a genus of evergreen coniferous trees that supported diverse herbivorous dinosaurs like Therizinosaurus. The climate of this formation was relatively temperate, mean annual temperatures between 45 and 75 degrees, characterized by monsoons with cold dry winters and hot rainy summers with vast amounts of rain. The wet environments of the Nemec Formation may have acted as an oasis-like area that attracted oviraptorids from arid neighbor localities such as the Barungoyot Formation, as evidenced by the presence of Nemectomaya in both regions. It has been previously suggested that the Nemec Formation may have been similar to the modern-day Okavango Delta, which is also composed of welled water surroundings and supported a vast variety of dinosaurs. The paleofauna of the Nemec Formation was diverse and rich, composed of other dinosaurs such as 4-foot Allosaurus mononicus and its similar-sized relative the Nemectonicus. Deinonychosaurus such as the feathered Adasaurus and Zanabazar was named after one of the first spiritual figureheads of Buddhism. The Ornithomimosaurs include the nimble Anserinmimus and Gallimimus from the first Jurassic Park, and this fauna also includes Oviraptorosaurus such as the 5-foot Abimimus, the similar size from Kenya, of which only one specimen has been found, and Elmisaurus, of which paleontologists also know very little. The list also includes Tyrannosaurids like the 20-foot Aliramus, possibly the 13-foot Bagaratin, and definitely the 33-foot long Tarbosaurus. This formation also features Ankylosaurids such as the 2-ton Cycania and its similar-sized relative the Tarchia. This environment also had Pachycephalosaurids like the small and nimble Homalocephali and its close relative the Perennocephali. Other megafauna included the Ornithomimosaurus Deinocris, Hadrosaurus Vorsboldi and Cerolophus, Titanosaurus Nemectosaurus, and Opisthosilicodia. As the sediments in which Therizinosaurus remains have been found at river base, it is suggested that it may have preferred to forage in riparian areas. Therizinosaurus, due to its prominent height and high browsing lifestyle, was one of the tallest dinosaurs in endemic formation paleofauna. It probably had no significant competition with other herbivores over the foliage. However, a niche partition with the Titanosaurs, also long-necked dinosaurs of the formation, could have occurred. If Therizinosaurus was a grazer, on the other hand, it would have competed with contemporary grazers such as Cerolophus. Heads up, this section will contain some Dominion spoilers, so if you still haven't seen it, don't say I didn't warn you. While the Therizinosaurus was not created by InGen during Jurassic Park or Jurassic World, it is said that the DNA of Therizinosaurus was used by InGen in the creation of the Indominus Rex in Jurassic World, most notably to give the Indominus Rex its semi-quadrupedal arms. An interview with Jurassic Park dinosaur consultant and world-renowned paleontologist Jack Horner confirmed just that. Jack Horner went on to explain that it was not just the arms though. He started the Indominus Rex process with a dinosaur called Therizinosaurus that had big grasping arms, and that was the most important thing, the grasping arms and its color, white. While Therizinosaurus served as a main inspiration for Indominus Rex, Therizinosaurus would not be created until it was finally cloned by Biosyn in the final movie of the franchise Jurassic World Dominion, and kept within the Biosyn sanctuary. This clone was skinnier than its real counterpart and walked with a horizontal gait rather than the vertical one. The Therizinosaurus had large arms and hands, ending in 3 large claws and feathers covering the back of its arms and back of its body. This Biosyn Therizinosaurus is extremely territorial and would viciously attack anything within its territory. It's been speculated that at some point in its life, the Therizinosaurus within the valley was blinded and left with a white layer of its eyes similar to cataracts. As a result, the Therizinosaurus would find its way through the sanctuary by echolocation, smelling, and hearing. After ejecting from a crashing plane, Claire Deering encounters the Therizinosaurus as she was hanging from the seat and parachute she ejected in. The dinosaur at first failed to notice her through its blindness and moved instead to fatally swat a nearby deer it heard and began grazing. Claire used this opportunity to unbuckle and fall to the ground, but the crash alerted the Therizinosaurus to her presence. The Therizinosaurus then began stalking around in search of Claire as she crawled into a pond. Claire eventually managed to get far enough into the pond to submerge herself until the dinosaur left. The Therizinosaurus would be evacuated to the Biosyn compound after Lewis Dodgson tried to dispose of his bioengineered locust, causing a huge forest fire in the valley. During the rampage of Giganotosaurus and fight with Rexy, Kyla Watts used the flares to distract the Giganotosaurus away from her and the evacuating group, causing its attention to focus on the Therizinosaurus as it followed the flare after the Giganotosaurus succeeded in knocking the Tyrannosaurus unconscious. The Therizinosaurus was quick to fight back when confronted, delivering slashing wounds to the larger carnivore, but lost a claw in its left hand to the Giganotosaurus bites. When Rexy regained consciousness, the Giganotosaurus was unable to determine quickly enough which enemy was the greater threat, allowing Rexy to ram the Giganotosaurus onto the Therizinosaurus claws, killing it. According to Industrial Light and Magic Senior Visual Effects Supervisor David Vickery, a long part of the Therizinosaurus development was spent looking at what type of feathers it would have, which turned out to be hair-like sparse vein structure feathers. This worked well with the idea of giving the feathers an oily-looking iridescence. The Therizinosaurus also featured in the sequel to the BBC series Walking with Dinosaurs, Chased by Dinosaurs, in which for the majority of the episode, the host believes the Therizinosaurus as a predator that slowly begins to find evidence that it is herbivorous. This episode also features a Therizinosaurus encounter with Tarbosaurus that ends with Therizinosaurus as the victor. Therizinosaurus actually appears early in the Jurassic Park video game franchise with its initial appearance in the 1997 The Lost World Jurassic Park game. It appears in the baryonyx level and is depicted as a burying animal. It can also be created in the game Jurassic Park 3 Park Builder, and also appears in Jurassic World the game and of course Jurassic World Evolution too. Other popular video games include Ark, where they are portrayed as territorially aggressive and can be commonly found on beaches and jungles. Hey guys, so welcome to my park, and to those who have been here before, well, welcome back. As you can see, I've gone ahead and expanded the park by quite a bit, and the Therizinosaurus habitat we're going to build is going to be over here, next to our Dimetrodons. As you can see, I've got 2 pairs. They're just chilling about. And for this one, let's go ahead and do something different. We've done a lot of flat plains mostly throughout these videos. recently. So on this one, I kind of want to do a small mountain here in the middle, not too tall. I do want to add 2 winding rivers around it. So let's go ahead and make the radius smaller. And let's actually expand it down this way. That's actually perfect. And just go ahead and smooth out the top. And I think that's pretty good. It does look a bit, you know, unnatural. So let's actually move it a bit this way. And I think I do feel a bit more comfortable that way. Let's flatten it out just a bit. And let's move on to our water. Like I said, 2 braided rivers. As we mentioned, the habitat that these guys lived in, there was a lot of water. A lot of braided rivers. They like to be around those types of water sources. So we're going to go ahead and replicate that. I want to see if I can connect these two, but I don't think I will. Yeah, terrain constraints. So let's leave it like that. So let's make it seem like the water flows that way. So there we go, river. And, you know, if we'd like to, we can go ahead and make it a bit skinnier on some parts. I want to connect the rivers. I don't want to have it look like that. So let's do this. And it's looking good so far. You can get some embankments right there, you know, it looks pretty good. And let's actually expand it like that. Perfect. Now that we're done with our topography, let's go ahead and switch over to the terrain. So, for the most part, we're gonna switch it up to this grass since we do kind of want to have a very wetland looking terrain. I think we're mostly going to leave this grassy looking, mossy looking plant on the embankments right here. And then the rest will be grass. But then we're going to mix some sand and some rock in here as well. I think I'm liking this as a rock area. But you know, you can do whatever you'd like. But here we go. Rocky area right here. With the softer looking rock up here. This is going to be the rocky area for these guys, with Therizinosaurus. And like I mentioned, we're going to leave the regular grass over here, mostly on these parts over here. Couldn't build right there because of this, the monorail, but you know, the grass is here. And let's go ahead and just put some sand throughout. We're going to Bob Ross it. We don't want such a uniform terrain. We are trying to recreate a natural habitat, so having things here and there, Bob Rossing it, as I like to call it, really helps. Don't have to do too much, but you know, just enough so that you know you have some variety in your terrain. And you can always switch up to the dirt as well. As I mentioned, I do like to sometimes draw some routes where the animals would mostly traverse for the most part. You know, if you go to a zoo or anything like that, you'll have some dirt roads where these animals mostly traverse, so they kick up the dirt. Mostly same thing with like zookeepers, you know, where they walk through the mows, the feeders and such like that. So we'll add a little bit of dirt. It's very, very not noticeable, so it's not even gonna matter that much. But as long as it's there, you know, I guess the little details work out at the end. So we'll keep it that way. And I think we're good. As I mentioned, the terrain, very, very wetland, so mostly sticking with, you know, the mossy looking grass and a bit of dirt, a bit of sand. I like this area as rock, so we can have a bit of variety in the topography. So saying that, let's go ahead and put some rocks over here. And as I mentioned in all my videos, I've always liked to group them. Let's actually see if we can build some up here. Nice, okay. And let's switch it up with some tiger rock now. Let's have it reach all the way over here. Okay. And then if we'd like, let's go ahead and build some over here. Not too many, just enough. 1, 2, 3, 4. Use some smaller rockies. And if we'd like, we can always connect these two right here. Kind of have like a rock trail in a way. From here to over there. A little rock trail right here. Oh look, you can connect it over here. Perfect. I don't even know, right? We can do this. We'll just do that. And lastly, we're gonna work with our nature foliage plants. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, there's a plant called Araucaria. No, I just said that wrong. Araucaria. Sorry. And the plant that looks most similar to it are these seed plants. So we're gonna use a lot of it in this enclosure. This is the one that looks most similar to that one that I just mentioned. So try to use it, you know, very, very sparsely across your habitat. Just because that was the majority of the foliage that Therizinosaurus would eat. But since it was also a lot of coniferous forests, it was also the Cretaceous period, you kind of want to have a variety of plants in here. At the end of the day, it's your habitat, so you can have it however you like. So I always like to have these kind of combined in there between, mostly in the background. So we can leave these seed plants up here in the front. Mostly work with this forest in the background, but not too much where we're losing those rock formations. Just enough so it gives it a bit of you know, some places where Therizinosaurus could hide, and you know, where they could rest, and just make the habitat look more lively. You can always, you know, put in some ginkgos here and there, since these, you know, plants also lived during this time. You just not add too many. You don't want to lose theories in there. You can always add some cycads if you like. Some Temskia, which was a type of fern that lived during the Cretaceous period. You can add some over here. And as I mentioned, just go ahead and I'm going to try to replace these guys. There we go. As long as we have these tall guys. The Araucarias, as I mentioned. Oh, there we go. That's a perfect one right there. And I think we're done, guys. I mean, we can always add a bit more, you know, lower foliage over here. Make it look more lively. And, you know, you can always finish it up with some rocks. But then again, if you do want to add a gyrosphere, you want to do, you know, a Jurassic tour or something, you know, just be careful where you put down your stuff. Be careful where you put down your river, so you can go ahead and have some roots going in and out of your enclosure. But aside from that, I think it looks really well. You know, you got this nice little middle part where you can see most of these Therizinosaurus are hanging about. Actually, they're mostly hanging out in the water right here. But this one I actually like this one because it kind of gives me the vibes of the Indominus Rex, you know, the first illustrations that they had about the dinosaur. But yeah, you guys let me know what you would make different, what you would change. So yeah, I think this habitat looks pretty good. What should the next video be on? After making a species guide on the Dominion dinosaurs due to popular demand, I decided we'll switch it up a little. As you can tell, I've been going in alphabetical order, so the next dinosaur is Chasmosaurus, but I've had requests for Dilophosaurus, Torosaurus, and Parasaurolophus. Comment below and let me know which dinosaur you would like to be featured next. Being one of the most unorthodox dinosaurs ever discovered, it is no doubt that Therizinosaurus is a beautiful but deadly addition to your Jurassic Park. Thank you all for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.